personally think that that the communities that we're involved in aren't breeding trust. And I also think that many of us have grown up in untrustworthy situations, causing us to doubt the people around us. My friends, welcome to the Blue Couch Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Pitcher, and
I'm your cohort, co-partner in crime, and I'm definitely not cohesive. John Maskey.
no, he's not. And today we are going to be talking about four topics. Hopefully, last time we tried to do this, it ended up being a 2 episode thing. So we're going to try and keep ourselves to our notes. And we're going to talk about what hinders spiritual freedom. We're going to talk about what books we've been reading. We're going to talk about what is a prayer room. And then John's going to finish us off by talking about what a day with the Lord looks like with him.
Love
And
it.
I've got a new mug today.
Facts.
No, false.
False.
Yes. If you guys know what this is from, then you'll like
This is definitely not a plug.
This
but
is
if
not
you
a
know,
plug.
you know.
If they want to sponsor my podcast, I don't think they would.
I don't know how that works.
Do you have a beverage of choice today, John?
No, I'm on 20. What's today? The 27th?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on 27 days of no sugar, so my options are limited. I had a latte with heavy cream and 1 pump of vanilla, sugar-free vanilla from Starbucks this morning, which is actually pretty good. It's kind of been my go-to, but I'm trying to cut down on the caffeine per day. So I use it Sunday morning because, wake up Sunday morning, I'm a zombie, so.
So John recently, this might be controversial, but do you like Dutch
Everything
Bros?
about me is controversial.
Do
I what?
Do you like Dutch Bros now?
Yes, I'll begrudgingly admit. Although since the sugar-free kick, I haven't gone there. I go to Dutch Brothers for their iced coffees. They have good stuff. Shout out Cameron Howell. He reintroduced me, converted me, I should say. The only thing I've ever liked from there was their energy drinks, but now I will get their iced mocha coffees. They're pretty good. Yeah, I can't. That's one of the first things I can't wait to go back to Dutch Brothers and get a chocolatey iced coffee. Can I get a hi, man, brother?
Dutch, yes, the Dutch Brothers.
The Dutch Bros. Oh, the Dutch Brothers. That's right. I keep saying Dutch Brothers, and I get corrected all the time. It's Dutch Bros.
Yeah, it's Dutch Bros. Stop calling it Dutch Brothers.
Bros is an abbreviation for brothers. Pardon my clarity. Shameless
all
plug.
Right. Well, my friends, pull up a pillow and a blanket and join us on the Blue Couch Podcast. All right, so on episode 3, we talk about what the scripture says about spiritual freedom. And I think everybody needs freedom. There's freedom in Christ. Too many of us live bound in shame and in guilt. And it's time to free ourselves with the authority that Christ has given us. So the first topic that John and I are going to talk about today is what hinders spiritual freedom. What hinders a person from being spiritually free? And I would say this, and John, you can feel free to tell me what you think at any point of this, but he's going to read a verse for us here in a second. I think the first thing that probably hinders spiritual freedom is unfaithful leadership. And let's talk about the verse that we hit on last episode, John 10:10. John
10:10. John 10:10 in the NLT. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life.
I love it. And so remember, when Jesus spoke about this, he was talking to his disciples about him being the door to the sheep. And love this picture. Absolutely love it. It seems to me that Christ is sharing his affection and protection for his sheep. And he's also making a distinction specifically to unfaithful leaders of that day that are leading people astray. And that brings me to say that I think one of the things that hinders a person's spiritual freedom with Christ is unfaithful leadership in their lives, right? Faithful people ought to be connecting people to Jesus. What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, I mean, the analogy there is pretty clear. Jesus is saying that his purpose is to give and the enemy's purpose is to take. So when you have somebody who's not aligned with the heart of Jesus, even though they may be well intentioned, if they're not aligned with his heart and his purpose, they end up just becoming by proxy a replacement and a poor replacement, which ends up hurting people at best and wounding and robbing people emotionally, spiritually, sometimes even financially and maritally at worst.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it's safe to say that anybody who's not living in that kingdom mindset that doesn't have the heart of Jesus and is trying to lead people, man, it's the blind leading the blind, right? I mean, you're just going to stumble
absolutely.
into a pit and hurt yourself and hurt others.
Yeah, so when we find Christ, it's our responsibility to help other people find Christ as well. And if we haven't found Christ,
Exactly.
then how are we ever going to help people get there?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to jump kind of back a moment to the three things that a person needs to grow with somebody. And then I want to kind of tie that in. And so, listeners, if you remember, we've probably mentioned this. I don't know how many times I'm going to mention this, but this is one of those. There are certain like truths that have like helped me in my life. This would be one of those ones. A person needs three things to grow with an individual, or I would say with a group. They need to be with somebody who's trustworthy and real. They need to be with somebody who deeply understands them, and they need to be with someone who unconditionally accepts them. But what happens when you and I feel the shepherd doesn't fit that criteria? I would say that's an emotional disconnect. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't trust somebody who's leading you to lead you properly, then you're going to be questioning every step of the way. And even when they make decisions that might not even hurt you intentionally, you'll on purpose, your default is to misunderstand. Your
Yeah,
default is to mistrust. And so, not that we need to give every person in a leadership role the benefit of the doubt, because we certainly shouldn't. We should hold to a standard, and it's leadership's responsibility to clarify their decisions as they continue going on. However, if someone does something innocently or a simple mistake is done, it can be blown out of the water, right? We've seen this happen in our own personal lives. I know you and I have seen this,
oh yeah,
and then the
100%.
listeners for sure, they've seen it as well. I mean, when it's for some reason somebody's just ripped out of the church, well, because they had a grievance and they couldn't follow. And I know I'm speaking more towards leadership that did something out of ignorance, but then there are also those who do things that they're just reckless, and we've
Yeah,
we've been under that leadership as well. And it wasn't intentional, like malicious behavior. It was just careless. You're careless with the flock, and what happens with sheep when you're careless is you lose some, or some get hurt, or worse. And so,
yeah.
yeah, I think that definitely holds.
So then that emotional struggle that they have kind of gets connected to Christ, like Christ or our relationship with God. We begin to mirror those negative feelings onto Him. So we begin to like lose what I believe Christ has wanted to give to us, and that's an abundant life, right? I come to give you
Yes.
life and life more abundant, right? So a person with a lot of life has some things. And could we say they've stamina, they've got energy, they've got ability to do things, they've got enjoyment, they've got satisfaction, and I would say they even have like a level of comfort. So I want to talk about this for a minute, John. I think one of the bigger reasons that I personally didn't have the abundant life was because there was a lack of mentorship in my life. So if we're talking about like unfaithful leadership, I mean, I felt like people were speaking into me at certain points with positivity towards like the future. But until I was a senior in high school, I don't think that I had a person that spoke to me as a mentor figure. And I mean, like the blue couch. I mean, my stepmom was a mentor. I had a couple of stepdads that were really that spoke into my life at certain points, but I really didn't
Yeah.
have anybody that was like consistently pouring into my life.
Hmm.
What's been your experience with mentorship in your life?
Yeah, I never really had somebody in that role. I had certainly had people I looked up to, but I could say that my father was one when it came to spiritual issues, but not in the truest sense of like a mentor, um, or at least one that maybe I would have hoped for looking back. obviously we do the best with what we can, and so I certainly don't put any blame on him. But as far as a dearth of mentorship, I know when I got to college,
I
I had
love
a
that
bus
word.
captain. Yeah,
Dearth.
I look for ways to sneak it in. There's been a dearth of the word dearth lately, and we're gonna unearth it.
We're gonna unearth that dearth.
Unearth the dearth. That dude, that's and we'll talk about this, but that might be our next episode name. Unearth the dearth. Sorry. We'll have to cut that 5 minutes out. For the Patreon members, you're
That
listening to this.
yes,
What
you
a
can get
privilege.
this
You
stuff.
can look at what you're missing out on, people. Look at what you're missing out on. My emotional epilepsy is
You're
is on
trying
full
not to say
display.
emotional damage.
Oh my goodness.
Uh,
Anyway, back on track
yes.
before there was a dearth of actual intelligence. Um, I had a bus captain in college that I felt was a true mentor in a way. Took me under his wing and really kind of helped me as a bumbling, awkward um missionary kid who didn't really know the ins and outs of just some practical stuff of American life.
Yeah.
And I know I should be giving probably a more religious response here, but this was somebody who helped me with the practical and the mundane, or at least what everybody in this culture would assume was practical and mundane, but to me was vital because I had these gaps in my life where I had not been taught these like simple things. And I don't mean things like how to use a spoon or open a door, or, turn on lights. I mean like here's some help filing your taxes, which I'd never done before. Here's how the American like postal system works. Here's how you mail a letter, right? Just some simple things that I'd never taken the time to do. Let me drive a car around for the first time. I actually had another gentleman in college that would let me drive his car around on occasion too. He was a member of the church. He wasn't even at college, but as far as mentors go, that was the situation for me during college, and then afterwards, the church I worked in for the better part of 8 years. Pastor Lou Rossi was a great friend, a father figure, and not just my pastor, my boss, but he was definitely a mentor to me. Um, yeah, it was a blessing to work with him and to see how to handle people. And nobody's perfect, but what I learned from him was definitely would definitely fall in that bracket of a mentor. And then in the last couple of years, living in Ohio, Jared Long and Ken Scott, I would consider them to be two mentors of mine as well. There were often times where I'd be at work at the job, and again, just in a 2 year period, where these men would be able to meet up with me on my lunch break. And I remember one time meeting Jared Long at a Chipotle close to my work because he happened to be in the area. And I said, hey, you want to grab lunch? And so we did. And I just kind of picked his brain about end time prophecies and revelation, which I knew was kind of a side hobby for him. And I had some questions. It was mind blowing to me, just earth shattering. But so much more to have that personal time. And then of course, Ken Scott was a very dear friend, still is of mine, and many times I needed some help, whether it be emotionally or spiritual guidance, whether it's with child rearing or just all the things that you should want from a pastor, right? And a friend. And he was able to be that shepherd for me in those areas and a true mentor. And so I find myself very blessed because I know in that just that short list I mentioned, it might be short to some, but for others, it's priceless because you've never had something like that. And so
Wow.
um, it's been I've been blessed for sure.
Yeah, I like that. I think I don't know if I can label anybody that I had as a mentor up until my senior year of high school. And then I had a guy named
Mm,
Dennis Golchow who was an assistant pastor at our church, and he mentored me and
mm,
he taught me how to sing. He was but then he uh I was I was struggling my through my parents' divorce, and then I moved out of my mom's house and I moved in with my dad. It was a really tough time for me. And I remember we would play basketball on Sunday nights after church every Sunday night. And a lot of times he would drive me home and we would
mm.
just sit there and we would talk for 1, 2, 3 hours, and I would just lay my problems out, and he would give me advice and he would talk to me. And I remember there were times where I was frustrated with my dad even, and I would share those frustrations, and I just remember him always gently pushing me back to my father, and helping me understand like that leadership in my life. I had never had anything like that before. My sister and I, my mom worked full time, my stepdad worked full time, and so my sister and I, a lot of times we were just we were just at home, and my mom was a good mom, but we did not. She was busy providing for us. So, I don't know if we got a lot of that mentorship as I'd like to say. But then when I got to college, for me it was Golia Begley.
Mm,
I worked for him, Golia, and he actually
yeah.
just came and visited me recently, and it was such a sweet visit. And um, but I would be able to ask him questions. I could ask him doctrinal questions, and it's one of those things where there are certain people in my life where I feel or have felt that they met that unconditional acceptance role in my life. And all these people kind of fit that role where I felt like I could ask them any question and they would not judge me for asking that question. Whereas,
Yeah.
like the first church that I went to, I was often afraid to ask uh, my pastor about Bible questions because I might be, I might be looked, I would definitely be looked down upon. At least that's how I felt.
Well,
And
hang on. When you say asking Bible questions, this is a pastor you're talking about,
yes, yeah.
right?
So
So
I didn't grow up with that intense
you're talking
spiritual
about asking
background.
questions that may be like playing devil's
Controversial even.
advocate,
Yeah,
trying to,
sure.
sure. There wasn't
Yeah.
space for that.
But then there were other areas that he really helped me in my life. I felt like he helped grow me in the area of character, which I really needed. I worked very hard under him. And he's one of the ones who really cultivated that in me. Um, but then he would often walk me around and he would teach me things, and so I can't say that everything, but I would often feel like, is this an okay thing to talk about? So
Sure.
I would say
You got to
like
pick
my
and choose your
first
topics.
real mentor was my pastor that I worked for when I was in Washington. His name's Terry Mingy,
Mm,
and he's retired now, and he's an evangelist. But I would from for 3 years I would just go to his office every Wednesday night before church, and we'd talk for half an hour, and I'd ask him questions. I'd tell him about my
wow.
life. And then and then after 2 years, he hired me on, and we just continued it. So then we bumped it up to an hour. So every Tuesday, we started reading books together, and I would ask him questions about ministry, about life, about whatever. And that was extremely valuable to me. And then I was like, well, I'm sitting here complaining about all these people who never mentored me, right? Why am I not mentoring anybody? So I started mentoring people, and I started mentoring some people at the church that we were at. And then now I mentor people. I mentor college students. I mentor students, and I mentor staff members at our school that we work at now currently. And it's something that I just want to pour into people's lives, right? And I want to help them. And I read this study that I thought was extremely interesting. It's 75% of executives credit their success to mentors, and recent research shows that 90% of employees with a career mentor are happy at work. That's a Harvard business study. I mean, those are some pretty staggering numbers right there. Like,
That's high percentage for sure.
yeah, so I'm thinking if I want to help people be successful, then I need to mentor people. And if I want to be successful, I need to find people that can mentor me. And I think one thing, and this is to my discredit, there were many years where I was like hoping for a mentor to kind of like fall into my lap. And there was a point where I realized it was actually at college, I think. I don't know who, somebody preached a message or something. I was like, I just need to start seeking these dudes out. And I got a funny story for this. So I started going to college or some of our college teachers and just ask. I'd have a list of questions to ask them. And so, do you remember Tom Vogel?
Yes.
Okay. So, have you ever taken a class with him?
No, I
Okay,
don't think
so
so.
we took it's
Actually, I
been
know I haven't. I would remember that.
I took a class called Church and School Administration with him, and
Mm.
then which it sounds boring. And listen, I love the guy, but he does not teach in a
Fast paced.
he's very monotone.
Yeah.
Church and school administration is not a fun subject to begin with, and then you add that
Right.
on top
It's
of that,
kind of
you're
a
like
double negative there.
every day in class. Um, but he's so smart. He taught me a couple of really, really good things, and I really admired him a lot. And I remember, but he just wasn't a talker. So he'd come in, he'd teach his class, he'd get done, he'd walk out, right? And I went to his office one day and I said, "Hey, sir, do you mind if I walk you out to your car today?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And he probably thought I was like, "This guy thinks I need help walking out of my car." And I was like, "I just want to ask you a few questions." And he tells me that I can. So I had a list of like 5 questions to ask him. I was walking with him and asked him one question. He gives me the answer. Ask him another question, gives me the answer. Ask him another question, gives me the answer. And they're not long answers, they're just short answers. We get to his car. I ask him one more question. It gives me the answer. And then he just looks at me. And I was like, all right, have a good day.
Are you done?
Yeah. But
Sounds like somebody's trying to get home.
yes, absolutely. And I didn't understand that back then. I just had nothing but time. But I also have
Yeah, it's
water over here.
unfortunate for you though as a student because you're looking for an opportunity to spend some time, being chiseled and whittled by your leadership, and they've just no time for you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you probably remember that more than you probably don't even remember the questions you asked,
I have
but you
no
remember that.
idea. I
Yeah.
remember that experience. I remember how awkward it felt
Yeah.
to desire because I remember in high school his my favorite book was a book that he wrote
Mm.
and it was called Growing Up in Vietnam.
Hmm.
Still love the book. But I had a signed copy of it and everything. Man, this guy was somebody who was just really cool in my eyes. And listen, he's really awesome. I mean, I don't know what he's doing nowadays, but I do know this that in that moment, I was like, okay, and that's just not his personality, right? I can't expect everybody to be like me. So that's kind of where Golia stepped in, and he became that person and he kind of became my pastor at college. And that was something that I really needed. I didn't feel like I had
Awesome.
anybody else. So that's pretty cool.
Mm.
So I think that's I think probably one of the biggest things that keeps a person from a spiritual freedom or is leaders that don't help connect them to Christ. I think we all ought to find spiritual freedom and then help people find spiritual freedom. Find Christ, help others find Christ. It's not about bringing people to me so that I can have a big name and I can be great. It's about bringing people to a place where I can help them connect to the one who's going to give them that life more abundant. But that other thing that I wanted to mention is emotional bottling, and I want to kind of hit a new verse today, which is uh, John 14:1, and we're going to turn to that verse now.
Yeah, John 14, verse 1 in the NLT. Don't let your heart be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me.
Yeah, so here Jesus tells his disciples that one of them is going to betray them in the previous verses. So if we were to look at chapter 13, he basically tells Peter, "You're going to deny me 3 times. Before the cock crows 3 times, you're going to deny me 3 times."
Mm.
And then he starts off this next section, and it's like the very next thing he says is, "All right, guys, don't let your hearts be troubled." Right? Now, I don't know how
Right.
you, John, but I do feel strongly that if Jesus told me I was going to betray him or that I was going to betray him, I would be a little bit troubled.
Right.
Yeah. So like if you came to me and said, "Hey Charlie, I just wanted to let you know you're going to betray me," I would be troubled. I don't know. Would you?
Especially if I told you that and you knew I was omniscient.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wait, so this really is going to happen. Oh, no, stink.
The best part is when Peter
Don't be
like
troubled,
argues
Charlie.
back.
Right.
Peter's like, "No, I'm
Right, right,
not."
right. No, I would never do that. Oh, wait, you can see the future.
Oh man. Well, I do think there's a good lesson from this in a troubled society. I think we often ask why, which isn't a bad question. Actually, that's probably the question that gets me the most in trouble at times. But he advises them to put their trust in God with their troubled hearts. And so, John, do you think that as a society as a whole, we struggle to trust? What do
Yeah,
you think?
I think we're geared to question everything, and not from a healthy mindset. You
No.
know, there's a philosophical trend, and it's I don't even know if you can call it a trend, maybe just a line of thought that you question everything, and that's fine because truth holds up under questioning.
Yeah.
But I think since probably I'll say this: there used to be a reverence for certain offices, and there was just an automatic trust given to certain positions, with
Yeah.
minor exceptions when it came to the office of pastor, or even president, or you know, police, or any sort of leadership, right? And then in the last 60, 50, whatever, I don't even know the research to tell the number of years, but there's definitely been a mistrust. And I think with the rapid sharing of information and how quickly we're able to broadcast worldwide a private encounter of someone's bad day,
Hmm.
that gets superimposed on the office of that whatever that person would hold. And I don't mean to defend those private bad days or even those sinister intents as they might come up. Certainly those need to be exposed, but there's definitely a lack of trust in society with people. And I think also in a post-COVID world, I think a lot of people are just um we were all forced to go hunkered down in our turtle shells for about six
Sure.
months, and everybody was afraid of everybody else, and
Well,
not even
think
afraid of everybody else, but just we had this mindset of like a little bit of like an apocalypse. We're all on our own. Everybody's on their own out there in the world, and so we kind of forgot. I think we forgot how to trust people. We
well,
forgot how
2000,
to trust each other.
yeah, in 2019, actually before COVID, a Pew Research stated this that 79% of Americans have far too little trust in each other. Why do you think that is? I mean, I'll start. I personally think that the communities that we're involved in aren't breeding trust. And I also think that many of us have grown up in untrustworthy situations, causing us to doubt the people around us. And so, what happens when you grow up in something that you trust and then you find out that it's untrustworthy? How many Americans, how many people across the world, let's just talk about across the world, have grown up in situations where they thought they could trust and then that trust was broken? Who do you trust after that?
Mm.
So one of those things that we need to grow with each other is we need to be with people that are trustworthy and real. I mean, John 14, verse 5 and 6, he goes on and says, well, I'll just read the verses leading up to there. There's more than enough room in my father's home. If this were not so, I would have told you. I'm going to prepare a place for you. When everything is ready, I'll come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am, and you know the way to where I'm going. No, we don't know, Lord, Thomas said. We have no idea where you are going, so how can we know the way? Right? I like that, doubting Thomas. And Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If you had really known me, you would know who my Father is. From now on, you do not know him. You do know him and have seen him. You've seen him. That's pretty interesting. So Jesus tells them that he goes to prepare a place for them, which is kind of a nice segue moment, right? What is that, John? What is that place?
Well, we all know we all get our own individual gold plated mansions in heaven. We all live in isolation
I've
from each
got a
other. We've all
mansion
got our own little
with a
green
big
hill,
top. Yeah,
green knotted hill.
in
You
my
know,
house are many
not even able
mansions.
to yell, not even able to yell to the closest sibling in Christ, you know. We're just living by ourselves in our own individual golden mansions, you know. That's heaven to me.
For many years,
Um
I just visualized that as like I'm like walking to my mansion, and because I don't know, you've probably done this
I get
too.
this image of I don't know if you've ever seen the Lego Batman movie.
Yes.
but Bruce Wayne at the beginning.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
that's what
Like
I think of. Like
like
he's just in
walking
this
around my big empty
massive
house.
mansion, walking around by himself, watches a movie by himself, microwaves some food by himself. It's just this massive industrial sized kitchen because it's a giant mansion, right?
So then what I start doing is I start imagining like my friends and relatives there, the people that are closest to me, and I'm like, well, what if, is that allowed?
Right. Right. Can they live with me? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, we all get our own golden mansion. All
Yes.
right, well, so I guess we don't see each other.
Yeah.
It
Well,
quickly falls apart under the logic of like, okay, let's think about the context here.
this would be a great place to plug something that you have as kind of a project. What do you do where you clarify things?
Right. Yes. What a great segue into my 40 plus episode podcast, Pardon My Clarity, found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, in various
Is it on Apple
degrees.
Podcasts?
It's everywhere, brother. I'm in Nigeria. I have listeners from the Ukraine and Russia, the
You're right. I don't
FBI.
know
No,
why
I'm
I
just
just
kidding.
asked if it's on Apple Podcasts. I think that's where I listen to it the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Clearly someone hasn't even listened to an
Okay, first
episode.
I've listened to
First of all, you're about to do a real
I've
high
listened
pitch.
to you saw it coming. I've
First of
listened to a
all,
lot of them. All right, John
a lot
has
of
been
people.
had been
Yeah.
making fun of me because apparently my Donald Trump impersonation is too high pitched.
It's very realistic in the mannerisms and the speaking, but the tone is just like an octave higher than Donald Joseph Trump.
Some people been saying, John,
See, right there, dude. You right there. You were like, see, a lot of people, and
a
it's like,
lot of people
yes,
been saying,
I love it. I actually love it. I believe it's a perfect hyperbole of Donald Trump. And my
uh,
son mimics. This is the ultimate form of flattery. My son, who, as you know, he's 5 years old, but he loves to mimic. He impersonates your Donald Trump when he's doing Donald Trump.
your
He
your
prefers your
son,
version.
your son's Donald Trump is the funniest thing that I have
It's
ever seen.
hilarious to see it coming out of a 5 year old, I think is the problem.
Well, yeah, because you're not expecting. He's like, and he does like the
Yeah,
breathe.
he does a
Some people been saying.
and he always adds in, they shot my ear.
They shot my. Yes, he
This
does.
boy's got a future in politics.
Oh man,
Oh my goodness.
what were we talking about? Oh, part of my
Guys, if you're on
clarity.
the Patreon, you're getting all this. This is great.
So yeah, John's got a really great podcast. It's called Pardon My Clarity, and I've really found it to be a great help in understanding some scriptures that sometimes we miss, some doctrines that we I think are not clear on. I don't know. You wanna tell us a little bit about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, it's a platform where I take common misconceptions about scripture, theology, God, the Bible, and we clarify them based on historical context and more importantly, scriptural context. So we hold them under the scrutiny of scripture and see how they hold up.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so we ruffle feathers.
I
I
like
said
it.
we, like it's
You,
more than just me.
it's just
I've
well,
had
you
guests,
you
so
and
maybe
many
it's
of your
we.
personalities.
Me and all the other Johns, right, John? Yes, John.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, back to what we're doing here. Jesus tells them that he goes to prepare a place for him.
Mm,
And so Jesus then tells them that or then Thomas says, we don't know where you're going. Maybe he thought Jesus was going to another city, but
mm,
Jesus wasn't saying that he would show us a way. He was saying he is the way.
right.
And Jesus' way was leading him to the cross, which we know because he then took that way. And he could say that Jesus, was the way to God, Christ, our mediator.
Mm,
So the amount of distrust in our society and abroad has really caused us to try to find other ways to define ourselves outside of God. And to that, I would say if you're listening today and if you're wandering about not knowing what to think, Jesus is the way. And if you're confused, not knowing what to think, Jesus is the truth. And if you feel dead inside and you don't know if you can go on, Jesus is the life. And to me, that sounds an awful lot like an emotional disconnection to Christ. When we don't have that, we're emotionally disconnected to him. And I don't know if we have a lot of time to spend on this, but do you have any thoughts to
No, I
add to
like the
that?
way you put it.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's why I call it emotional bottling. When we feel this way, we don't run to Christ. It's like we're bottling up all the hurt and all the anger and all the emotion. We're like emotional hoarders. And the
Mm,
only way to let it go is to run to the answer, and that's Jesus. That doesn't always happen in a church service. And it certainly can, but for me and John, it happened through our struggles. Jesus never wanted us to have a life without trouble, but he promised us that we would have, or that we could have, an untroubled heart even in a troubled life.
yeah.
And so in this verse, I guess there's an imperative, and I'm going to butcher this Greek word. It says, um, where it says me teresetho or something like that. It means to be troubled. It means stop being troubled. Like he wasn't saying, all right, guys, you don't have to be troubled. He says, no, stop being troubled. Don't be troubled by what's going to happen. Uh, you know, do you think, John, that I mean this was a command to the disciples? Stop being troubled. Yeah,
I mean, it was probably more of like a parent reassuring their child to calm down, or there's nothing to worry about. I've got you.
calm
Don't be
down.
troubled by these things. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Stop being troubled. You believe in God, believe in me,
Oh,
right? And also the
yeah.
word believe here is an imperative, right? He's saying do this. Believe in me.
Yeah.
There's so much there's so much. I remember when the last church we're at, when our there was just a lot of the transition from our previous pastor to the pastor that took over was very emotional in many ways. But I remember this particular moment, and I was just talking to we had some friends drive through town recently, and they stopped by for an evening, and they mentioned this, and we've talked about it a few times. Not you and I, but them and I.
Hmm.
But he's candidating to take the church, and some people are like, I don't know if they're quite ready for it. And they'd had this pastor for over 30 years, and now they're waiting, they're listening to this other man basically come in and say, I'm ready, I want to be your pastor.
Yeah.
He gets up, stands behind the pulpit, kind of pauses. Everybody's just looking at him. He's looking at everybody else. And he goes, hey, it's going to be all right. And when he said that, it was like this emotional calm just like went over the auditorium. It was like, and I think everybody in that moment knew this is our pastor. And I remember when my pastor, the one who I was talking about mentoring, Terry, told me, he said, hey, this is who I want to take over for me. Or he didn't say who I want to, but he said, this is who I'm recommending. So I guess you could say that's who he wanted. I just remember when he gave me the name, I was like, I can't explain it other than the Holy Spirit. But it was like this calm that came over me. I was like, this is the one. I was like, okay.
Mm.
I was like, okay, Lord. I liked it. So I don't know. When Jesus says here, it just sounds like there's a lot of emotional security packed into this believe in me, right? Where he says, where he commands his disciples, hey, guys, stop being troubled. You believe God, don't you?
Yeah.
Believe in me. And so Jesus' solution to life was never to take away our troubles, but to have a relationship with him through our troubles. And that's why, we do prayer rooms now. John and I told you all our testimony, and my prayer is that we will be able to hear of other men's testimonies on this podcast. I've got people lined up. We want to do some interviews, and we want to talk to some people who have found this emotional connection with the Lord that many of us look for. But a prayer room is what helped us comb through our hurts and our past and unforgiveness and emotionally reconnect with God. We need mentors. We do. I think mentorship is probably one of those. um I think it's there's a John, there's a dearth of mentorship.
There it is.
There's a dearth of
You're welcome.
mentorship.
You're welcome, America.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe we need mentors. Uh, I, I think we need mentors, but we need Jesus more. But more so, I think we need mentors that will push us to Jesus and not pull us to them. I'm not trying to pull a following. I'm just trying to push people to Jesus. And along the way, I'm sure, it's like this podcast. I want this podcast to grow. I want people to come and be encouraged and help. And I want to use my spiritual gift to encourage others. But it's not about me. At the end of the day, it's about Christ. And we're going to get back to prayer rooms in our next segment.